Right, so our first section is going to be preparation, and this is preparation for anything you're doing, gel, acrylic, or even fiberglass. So we imagine we've done our consultation and we're at the stage where we're going to sanitize our own and the client's hands, and you know there's various ways to do that. Right, so we've sanitized and we're pushing back the cuticle. I want you to pay attention to how I'm holding our finger between my thumb and my index finger, and I'm really pulling back and I'm holding our finger firm. And the contact you have with the client is important from the onset, because what people want to do is they want to look at what you're doing, which means you can't see. So you have to be quite sort of firm with them. You're not going to hurt them at all, and they feel more secure when you've pulled their skin back, because it means you're not going to hurt them in any way with the file or any of the tools. And if you were to, it's your fingers that get it, not theirs. And this little finger wrap comes in handy if you're doing back-to-back clients. I've got a permanent sort of scar there where I used to file away my own finger, so that's a nice little thing. So yeah, so be firm with this. It's not little strokes, it's being very firm, and the flatter you have your spoon, the less it's going to hurt the client. Using the knife end, again, I'm being very, very firm, and educate your client, educate anyone who you've got their hands in your hands, and just tell them this is just dead skin. I'm removing it because we need to ensure that the product we use adheres fully to the natural nail. So effectively you're doing a mini manicure at this stage, and it really is just a mini one. If you find you're doing too much work, you have to charge for a mini manicure. And in a salon time and situation, you're only going to spend 1 minute per nail in the prep stage, so no more than 10 minutes is spent doing this work. So now comes, it's a hard manicure brush, never a soft one. The soft one will absorb the skin or the fibres, and then it goes straight back onto the nail. So a nice hard manicure brush, and they're relatively cheap as well. So I'm going to pick up a file, a natural nail file, and unlike manicures, I don't need to see anybody doing nice long strokes. We're going to go in and seesaw, and taking the corners round. It's important before you apply a tip or a sculpting form. Look at the angle I've got the file, I'm going right into the corners, and the shorter the natural nail the better. You don't really want your client to have any of her natural nail unless you're doing an infill to overlay and strengthen a nail. If you're using a tip or a form, it's best that you keep it as short as possible. So I've seesawed the free edge. Now I'm just going to bevel. I'm going to bevel downwards to take all those fibres down so we don't split the nail. Again, look, I'm pulling our finger right back. Between your two fingers on your working hand, index finger and middle finger, I'm pointing the file down towards the desk. You're going to see me use my hands in the same way all the way through, and this is for consistency, it's for posture, it's for comfort for you and the client. So we're going to imagine a rainbow. So if you're right-handed, you'll be going all the way over to the right. If you're left-handed, you'll be going all the way over to the left. So I'm pulling the skin back, and I'm just buffing into the side wall here. And you're not going to be aggressive with this. And your file should be about a 180 grit. Quite a new white block will also do this as well. And reassure the client, tell her you're not filing into her at all, because you'll have seen around the place that certain nail technicians do actually do that, and that's not why we're here as nail technicians. We're here to enhance the nail. We're not here to damage the nail. So I'll be fully happy with this once I see an even surface. And can you see that line of dust, the line of light? It comes right from the beginning in the preparation stage, and that's going to tell you if your nail is fully prepped. You don't want to see any white skin in the side walls. You don't want to see any like sort of little dimples and bits of dust on the nail. And even if you have to go back in with your tool, just to double check, are you exposing enough of that nail bed? Have you got enough of the dead skin off around here? Because as you know, this is an essential area, the cuticle zone, where the product has to be very, very thin, and we don't want any skin here, because the result will be lifting immediately. And it's one thing that we really have to try and avoid, and eradicate anything the client does herself at home to avoid lifting. But that's another story. So now I'm going to do 2 coats of dehydrator. The company I'm an ambassador for, Easy Flow, they call theirs Easy Bond, and you can be sparing with this. You can put it on the skin. It's not gonna hurt your client. And can you see how it evaporates, and when it goes back to that chalky finish, that's when you know that your nail is prepped and ready to go. I'm going to use a primer next. Somebody who is a nail biter or has an oily skin, oily nail bed, and you'll know by touching a hand, you'll use 2 coats of primer. Everybody else is just 1 coat. You would take the majority of the primer off the brush, and that'll scrub all 5 nails, so it'll do 1 hand with just that much. And you're going to scrub the nail and avoid the skin. So this is a perfect time to pause our videos, because that's the preparation finished. Anytime you're using anything on your desk, make sure you replace your lid immediately, especially with the e-tip box. Right, so on average, as an average rule, the generic way the tip box works is, and this is just an average across general people, the thumb's usually a 2, index fingers around a 7, then you get a 6, 5 or 6 for the middle finger, 6 or 7 for the ring finger, and then an 8 or 9 for the pinky. That's the rough guide, so that you've got it in your mind. So I'm going to put a tip on Lily's index finger, so I'm going to go straight in for, which way around is this? I'll try the 7 first. That'll be the one. And the way I'm testing to see if this is the tip, I'm going down and up, and if it's a tip that has contact area, so I want to see that her nail is butting right up to the edge of that contact area. Close the tip box. You could apply it like that, just with the contact area on. I'll show you just a little quick trick. I've turned the tip where the well is facing the ceiling, and the curve on the scissors is in the same curve of the tip. I'm going to go in on an angle and do little tiny snippets, and do it as a mirror of itself, so come out on the opposite side so that it's even on both sides. So then you've already got a nice smile line set in. With your brush on resin, the brush on resins are much better than the glue, the drop glue resins you've probably seen. You don't want to flood the well, but you definitely want to make sure there's enough on the sides, on the inside of the tip. And I'm carefully putting the brush back into the resin, not touching the sides, and closing the lid. I'm going to point our finger down, and the tip is down. Look where it is, facing down like that. And I'm going to go down, 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 and now up. So what I want to see with the tip is a graduation. So it's going to look like a very gentle slope from the client's nail bed down to where the tip is extended. I'm going to just make sure those sides are secure. Then on the other finger we'll do a sculpt. There's loads of different types of forms you can get, but this area is your most important area, and you can tailor this area with your scissors as well if somebody has like an uneven free edge. So I turned it over, and then I flipped out this middle perforation and secured it so that there's no overlap here. Turning it over, undo the perforation here so it opens like that. I'm going to roll this line like that with my thumbs into a cone, like a little tunnel, and then that means that the sculpting form is ready to apply. I'm going to take a finger, again I'm always pulling back because then it gives me a good view as well. So if you just relax your wrist. So with the tip, if you remember what I said, it's looking like a gradual curve. That's the line when you're applying the tip. It's the opposite with the form, it has to be straight. So use that middle line as your guide, and make sure you've got it right tucked underneath the free edge. The first thing you're going to secure is the sides. Don't secure here first because you'll get a wonky form. So secure the sides of the form first, and then pull it gently from the nail all the way along the end, so you're creating a comb and a barrel. Secure the tabs like that and just turn them over, And here's a little trick, you can put a snippet with the scissors in and it'll stop the form from popping open if it's a hot room. And then I'm going to press it down so it looks like a cone. It doesn't ever matter if those lines ever meet again, so just make it comfortable for you and for the client. So we'll pop back to the tip. I'm going to ask the client to put her elbow down on the desk and just flop her hand over like that, because this is going to cause the least resistance for the client. Remember, with the tip cutters, the blade is always facing you. The thumb is the lever, and your thumb, I want to see you flip back towards the client. So that's the action, that's the movement there. So once you've discussed the length, say we're going to go to about here, watch my arm action. Did you feel anything at all?
Not really.
If I had done that, which people tend to do, the client's like, we must have all been there, done that. So blade facing you, back towards the client, and then just get her to relax. When it comes to the shaping of your tip, and you see how quickly it was, I've applied that form in comparison to the work I have to do to size the tip, apply the tip, shape the tip. So we'll just go for maybe a Scoville-ish type shape. And the first thing I'm going to do is free edge and then a nice straight side wall. And I'm going to be talking you through the method with number pointers. So number one, and this is to shape a tip and to shape your product after it's been applied. Number one is your free edge, nice and straight. Number two is your side wall, nice and straight. Use the line of the file as a guide. Go over to your other side wall, so this is number three, nice and straight. And you see how I've got the skin pulled back and I'm tilting the file down like that. If I was doing that, look what's happening to your client. So down, nice and straight. Number four, it's the lower line. Now this is probably one of the most important things that you're going to do with your file. This is generally one of the weakest areas, so we don't want to take too much of the tip away. But what we want to ensure from the side is that it's nice and straight, coming straight out from her natural side wall. And again, don't be afraid to move your client's finger around, move your head so that you can see from all angles. So as straight as possible with this line. So that was number one, number two, number three, number four, and number five. And then whatever shape that you've discussed with your client, for tidying up around the circumference of the tip. I don't ever tend to buff over the surface, and if I do, the only time I would is if it's a very, very shiny tip, and then it is just I only buff over with a white block, because there really is not much need to buff in. Even if you were to stick the tip on with its contact area, I wouldn't waste any time filing on top of the tip. Like I said, just a quick with that, and then dust off. Now we've got our two nails prepared for product application. What I'm going to do is just turn this over, so I don't want any dust or any of the things I've prepped going into the nail. And one important thing is, don't ever use your tray area here to wipe your brush, because you'll end up burning your skin from repetitively touching it. Right, so preparation of your products. So I'm going to take my brush, and I always use a size 8, and I use this brush for absolutely everything. And Sue will tell you, I've had this brush for nearly 20 years, haven't I? So well, I've looked after it. When your monomer jar, it's better if it's ceramic or glass, or just enough space to be able to get a good dive in, and a cork lid, and even a wine cork actually fits perfectly into there. So with the monomer, I'm going to run it down the brush, and then it means you're not spilling it all over the table.
I'll just stare some.
Yes.
That's an SI monomer, isn't it?
Yes. Your monomer, keep it nice and clean, because as soon as it goes cloudy, you've contaminated it. The monomer is your brush cleaner. You should never use or need acetone, and I'm going to show you how to keep it as clean as possible as well. So that's the brush ready. Our powders. Is there pink and just put it like straight
Yeah,
over
yeah,
there.
definitely.
So I keep the monomer at the back and the polymer powders at the front, because that's the direction that I work. So we'll start with the tip. So I'm going to go into the monomer and press all of the bubbles out of the bristles, and then take the liquid off just one side of the brush till it's sitting in the point of the brush. Tapping the powder so you have a nice flat surface. I'm going to go in and 1, 2, 3. I'm going to look at it first and then apply it. The first thing I'm going to do is wipe my brush. Look, nice clean brush. Less of the stroke and more of the pattern at this stage. So at this stage it's just manoeuvring the product with the belly of the brush. So get your general positioning in, and it's a wipe. I want to see lots of wiping of the brush. The product will work for you, it will self-level. So once you can see that it's starting to lose its shine, that's when you're just going to gently use the back of the brush to press the product and push it down into the side walls. And you want to try and make it nice and even all the way across the top and as thin as possible at the sides. And to save yourself any work with the files, try and get as much done with the brush. Now I'm going to turn the brush around and just carve out that smile line. And let the product self-level, let it do its job without too much faffing. Go back into the liquid and you're going to do bead or ball number 2. Let it pop like that. If there's any excess dust, give it a little tap. See how it's just sitting in the end of my brush? I haven't picked it up and dragged it through like the baking a cake. Look how my brush is pointing down, 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 then come off, wipe the brush. Keep the belly of the brush nice and flat. Take it over to the left, back to the centre, over to the right, and see how it's patting at this stage again. It's more patting than pulling, and it's less strokes, more firmer controlled pats. And if there's any air bubbles in the liquid, this will be what pushes them up to the surface. And can you see I've done bead 1, bead 2, bead 3. I don't have a lip here because I didn't flick the product up when I applied it. I kept the bristles pointing down towards the cuticle. And now it's gentle stroking back. So I didn't do any stroking backwards until right until I got to the end. Wipe the brush. Back into the liquid for zone number 3. 1, 2, 3. The smallest one of all. Pull her finger right down and press. Allow the bead to become the shape. You don't have to become like a master of putting in shapes with acrylic. Let the bead be the exact circumference of the acrylic. And we know the height that we need is in this zone here, the apex. That's where we need the strength of the nail. So I'm constantly looking from the side as well to make sure I've got the shape in. And like I said before, the more you do with your brush, the less you do with your file. Occasionally you'll have to do little corrections, especially in the earlier days. So for instance, if I had like a low spot anywhere, I could go back in with a tiny little bit of acrylic. Say here, you could see a slight low point in the pink. So you can, but try not to do that too many times. Just use that as just a way of perfecting before you file. Right, so we'll move on to the sculpt. I'm using the same brush, the same products. 1, 2, the powder, 1, 2, 3. And we're going to apply it just on the line, just so it's just overlapping onto the nail bed. Wipe the brush, just let it go for a minute. Now, side walls. I'm pushing the side walls in first. Now I'm going over the top. I'm doing it quite slowly because we still have time. And this is you putting in your platform. And I'm going to show you this exact method as well with gel. Now with Easy Flow they do a 5-ball method. So this will be ball number 1. That's how the Americans tend to work. They'll do ball number 1. They'll put in the middle of their smile, just here. And then they go in with 2 legs. So they'll call this ball number 2. And that needs to just be a little bit drier because this has already started to set. So pat, 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 push it down into the corner, wipe your brush, gently, gently, gently pull it back, wipe the brush, and then you can carve in this side. And this you can, I'm just using white because it's plain to see, but this would be the way you would work with your coloured acrylics, with your glitter acrylics. And to begin with, it's good to do this with a clear, and then do any sort of artwork that you want on the top. So that was bead number 2. Number 3 would be the opposite leg. And then pat, 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 wipe the brush, leave it for a second, gentle pulling back. And you see every time I'm wiping my brush, I'm trying to bring it back to a point, because that's going to keep, it just means you work much easier that way. So I'm using the brush as a tool rather than the paintbrush idea. And you want to try and make it as even as possible on both sides. So that was ball number 3, sorry. Then this would be ball number 4. Just sitting in the very end of the brush, pointing the brush down towards the cuticle when you're applying it. I'm really forcing it in before I wipe my brush. Pat, 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 pat. Wipe. Pat, 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 pat. So can you see how I'm taking advantage of the brush? I'm really sort of using it to its full advantage. Wiping the brush constantly. And then for your final bead, so book number 5, then pull that finger down and allow the bead to do the work for you. All you're going to do is just move it. The shape is already there. And when I observe, I want to see you moving a finger around, and I want to see you moving your head around as well. So I'm just putting a tiny little bit extra there because I saw the low point. So the thinnest part is the circumference all the way around, and then your strength is in this area here. I'm wiping the brush. The final part with the brush, I'm just putting it back into the liquid after I've wiped it, taking the liquid back off the brush, patting the barrel, and then rolling it to a point. And that's my brush ready for the next time I use it without any cleaning and shaping. Anybody got any questions?
It's so much easier when you do it.
Yeah. It's because it is. It's because we don't need to overcomplicate it. I think a lot of people do. I think when people demonstrate, sometimes they want to make it about how good they are at doing the demonstration, when it's not about that.
Yeah.
It's about the people watching, how they learn and how much you're going to retain. And there's nothing worse than sitting and looking at your nail desk and forgetting in what order you use your products, what have you done here, and it's keeping a structure and keeping it quite regimental as well, and just always remembering little things that are going to save you problems in the future, you know.
I think I will use only that. I will not use steps no more because it's so.
Right, so we're ready for shaping. So I'm going to go back to the sculpt first, and I'm going to pinch it. So with my thumbnails, and this is actually easier when you've got acrylic on yourself, but I don't wear it because I play the guitar, unfortunately. So yeah, I'm squeezing right next to the legs there, squeezing. So what I'm doing here is I'm just strengthening the C curve. It's going to make our nail look even more elongated. And then once you've done that, you just pull like that, and off the form comes. You don't need any fancy tools, just use the underneath of your brush to give it a squeeze like that. And then you see how you get that nice deep C curve. Just gives it the illusion of the nail being longer, and it's much stronger for the client. To test that it's ready to file, you want that sound, right, same as the desk. You can pinch a tip as well. You can go back in and just do a slight pinch on a tip, but the tip already has its C curve. Right, so step one is our free edge. This feels a little bit rough to me, so I'm going to take the white block and just take off some of the sides of the file so I don't injure the client. So step one, free edge. Step two, side wall. Look at how I'm pointing the file downwards, so I'm not touching her skin. Same with this side, and it's like a gun. You want your hand as straight as you would hold a gun. Number 5, pulling the skin back, getting right into the lower line. And then we're going to do the top. The way you hold the file, it's always with your fingers on the top. I don't want to see anyone doing this because you're making life harder for yourself. Always when you're using your file, it's like that for around the circumference. When you're doing your side walls, like I said before, straight as a gun, like that. And the same with when you go right underneath and do your lower line. I'll just pick up this file. This is a slightly older file, but because I don't have a lot to do, I don't really need to be going in with a harsh file. So my file's facing down towards the desk. I'm using only my thumb as a lever and my index finger and middle finger. So I'm going over the rainbow. So down the side wall first. There's no point in looking at your nail and going in like that because you're going in blind. Look right down the side wall first. Start filing. Create your line, and you file because when it's round on the end, it's actually filing the cuticle when you full stroke at the same time. And again, it's the angle of the file, it's the tilt, so you don't want to be doing that because you're going to catch her. So it's the tilt. So I'm going to get right to the middle and mention the line of light again, which always starts with a line of dust. So can you see the line of dust I'm starting to get? I'm going to follow it because that will turn into your line of light, and that will show your consistency, and you'll be able to achieve a glass-like finish. So I'm taking that line all the way to the centre. Once it crosses over, and I'm doing the whole nail, going all the way to the free edge. When it crosses over to the other side, you're going to turn your hand around and then back to that gun position again, continuing the line. So you go all the way over the rainbow until that line disappears off the side. Go back into your previous areas as long as you're not sort of messing with the shape that you've initially set. I'll just have a look in around the cuticle. Make sure it's nice and even on both sides. being careful as well to not let any of your acrylic, when you're applying it, to flick underneath the tip. And if it does, you can clip it off with with cuticle nippers, but it doesn't look the best to your client. So just always be aware that don't ever flood the cuticle with monomer or with your product, and always be careful with these side walls, keeping them nice and clean. And then the client feels better as well. She'll walk away feeling like they're just her natural nails. She'll not feel like anything's been put on the top. So same story with the sculpt. The steps. Step 1, it's your free edge. And if you keep these steps in your mind, you'll know with all 10 nails where you're up to. And when you're sculpting, whether you're doing gel or acrylic, mainly with gel, you're going to swap hands a lot with your client, and I'll tell you about that when I do a gel demonstration. Number 3 is the other side wall, nice and straight. Number 4, I'm going into the lower line, pulling her skin right back. And you see the angle of the file, and see how flat it is facing the ceiling. And then number 5 is the other lower line. Then we'll start the surface shaping. So right down the side, start to find that dust line. Taking it all the way across the top. And you see, when I'm touching the nail, I'm starting with that part of the file and I'm using that. So I'm using my file to my advantage. But if you start sort of getting in like that, you're going to be on for hours. So see the dust starting to move across the centre. And I'm going to turn the file around into that gun position and continue to take the line across. Double check. Definitely got, and you'll see when the dust line starts to disappear from around the cuticle as well, that's when you know it's nice and flush to the natural nail. And you want this area here to be nice and thin without it flaking, but you want it to be nice and secure so that she doesn't get lifted. And within the few weeks of between our full set and our infills or our rebalance, you don't want her getting a ledge that her hair gets stuck underneath, and before you turn around she's popped a nail, and while she's popped it on the car door she's ripped off half, you know what can happen. So little things just from this onset, the more, it's like tailoring a suit. As soon as you get measured and tailored properly into the suit and you fit it like a glove, this is what your filing does, especially in sculpting. This is what sculpting does. It's unique tailoring to the client. So I'm going to get her to turn her hand around, and I want to see from her angle, because it always looks completely different. Right, so that was step number 6. This is number 7. Any type of sander, everywhere you've been with your files is where you're going to go with this. And the grit size is about, I would say 2000 grit. So the higher the number, the softer the file. I'm using the edges of the white block to get right in everywhere I've been with that file, and get underneath to get those little tip frays off. I'm going to remove any scratch marks just with this white block. Now, if you noticed, I didn't touch her nail with the top of mine, and that was because I didn't want my sweat or my oil going onto her nail plate when I've just spent 10 minutes preparing it. Now at this stage, with product on, I can touch. Yeah, and then do the same over here. So preparation and shaping and finishing is exactly the same for whether you're doing tips or sculpting with acrylic or with gel. So I hope that kind of makes it easier in your mind that all you're doing differently is your product application. Everywhere I've been with the file, all the way down the sides. I'm going with the white block or the sander. There's a few different sanders you can get. That's a nice OPI one. The smoother, easy flow, do a nice one. They call it the Sand Shark. And then our final stage is using a shiner. Then the dark side first. And look where I'm going underneath as well. Right around the cuticle. And the shine side. And you can, if you've used your files correctly, this is how you get your glass shine in the end. So you should have a nice shine on the nail before you do any top coats or you do any type of artwork, or if you do a gel top coat, whatever the finish you want. But you should be looking at this sort of glass finish, and that kind of brings an end to the shaping. So I'm not going to top coat. I'm just, because you can do whatever you want with these afterwards. It's going to give you a nice surface. All I'm going to do to finish off is dust off with the hard manicure brush right underneath as well, and apply some cuticle oil. And the cuticle oil must not contain lanolin, paraffin or mineral oil, and this is a very good retail opportunity as well, just to have some very small cuticle oils in. And encourage her to massage it in every day, especially after she's came out of the bath or the shower, and go back in with your shiner. Make sure she's not going to sort of walk out and start to pick, because it's another thing a client loves to do. Yeah. So don't be afraid to go back and recheck your work. If we've got time after you guys do a bit of work, I might see if I can show you something to go on top of the nail, and with the gel I think something that can be encapsulated into. So before we bring this to a finish, does anyone have any questions? None at all?
I just found out I make